Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Book Review of the Vampire, featuring me and Leonora.
And
Hello, Leonora.
me.
And you, and all of you, joining us in
Yes.
the audience tonight. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday evening. A few hellos before we get into it. Keeverdam, Mike R., Derek LaRue. Speaking of Keeverdam, first and foremost, hold on. Come on, StreamYard, you can catch up. There you go. Keeverdam, thank you so much. Also, there's a new fundraiser at the top of the chat box for Seftus Wolf. I'll get to that momentarily. Thank you, Keeverdam. Also, Derek LaRue. Thank you so much, Derek, as always, for your continued support and generosity. Hope you're doing well this evening and you enjoy the shoe, both the shoe and the show. Mike R., good evening. Nathan Willie, Urcule Di Stefano. And that's all I see right now. If you're lurking, if you're in the future, good evening. Yes, at the top of the chat box, we have several fundraisers up there. There's a new one up there for Seftus Wolf. That's the first one there. Life circumstances have caused Seftus to have his wages garnished for old problems. And take a look at the fundraiser there. And if you can donate, please do. If you can't, that's fine. If you can't, share those out on social media otherwise. And let's see, who else do we have up there? Sorry, real quick, make sure I know who I'm talking about here. I guess Maddie's up there for her cancer treatments, and as well for Lisa and her puppy, and taking care of her puppy. So you guys take a look at those. Please take a second and share or donate. Appreciate it very much. All right, so we are on the second part of the Vampire Lestat, titled The Legacy of Magnus, wherein our hero, Lestat, finally becomes the vampire Lestat. And quite suddenly, and without much preamble or activity thereafter, he's suddenly a vampire. So let's get into this. Leonora, what did you think overall about this section before we get into the specifics?
I like this section. I think it tells the story pretty well, like the origin story of Lestat, and how and now I think that I understand a couple of things from the previous book. Like, for example, like how, well, at least up to this point, we now know maybe why he doesn't share a lot of information or a lot of knowledge, let's say, to Louis and Claudia, uh because I mean, he was just like turned into a vampire, and then, like, okay, now I'm dead. And he had to figure out everything from himself. So probably he doesn't know a lot more, like, at least up to this point of the book. If it continues like that, we know that he doesn't know much, like, to share, or to be like a teacher to someone else, because it's super complicated now that we understand how he was turned into a vampire. So that's something that I that I'm that I like, that now I understand a little bit better. And also, like, this part of the same thing that we were talking about a little bit on the last show, that uh of these, like, two sides of the story. Like, on the first book, it seems like Lestat is like a horrible person in a lot of ways, no? And now you see this other part where he's caring, and that he wants everyone to be taken care of, and he still like has to struggle with this part of the people that he cares about, and it's a completely different character from what we saw in the first book. So those are the two main things that I take away from this chapter.
Yeah, there's it does explain a lot more. Again, we taking on faith, so to speak, that the narrators of each of these books are being honest about how characters behaved and everything. If we can imagine that the first book was being told truthfully, and Lestat is this, greedy, unemotional jerkwad, and in this book he's more of an idealist, artist, lover of life and everything. So he eventually becomes that.
Yeah,
Or if this,
we need to know what happened with all the money, right? Because he inherited a lot of wealth, and
Yes,
on the first book he's just like looking Louis because of for the dollar sign. So we need to know that too.
That was my least favorite part of this. Again, it's just it's the hand waving away. It's like, oh well, he just has money, just like in the first book. Louis just invests money and just has money, and so it's never a concern how they cover everything. It just is there. And in this instance, he just is handed a giant box of money. Now I understand that the money becomes a plot point in his character development here, but again, it just removes a whole swath of concerns for the character on top of having superhero-like powers and everything else.
Yeah, but also like someone in the chat, I don't know, like some shows past, but he said like, well, if you have like like a ton of like years in this earth, you are not supposed to be poor. So
well, no, I get that, but the thing is, Lestat didn't earn it. He just is handed it. It's not like there was any struggle. It's not like he did anything. He just shows up and suddenly he's a vampire and he's got a big chest full of wealth that's going to last him apparently all the way through to the modern day.
yeah.
But anyway, that aside, so our section starts out with Lestat effectively just being kidnapped by the mysterious face that was in the crowd.
Yeah.
And taken across the rooftops of London. Not London, Paris. Get my European cities all screwed up. And he keeps trying to fight this vampire. Now, the interesting thing about the vampire is that he's an old man who has no teeth except for his fangs.
Yes, ew.
He was made. He said he was made when he was old. So you've got like this elderly man who's like this super duper old vampire. He has no. He was apparently embraced. I'm going to keep using that phrase because that's how I know it. When he was elderly and had no teeth, but turning into a vampire gave him at least 4 teeth, presumably his vampire fangs, at least 2 of them. And there's also Lestat tries to fight back against him, but he can't because he's just immortal. And Magnus, I don't know that he ever says his name out loud, but Lestat gets that, I guess, mentally or psychically or something. And the interesting thing in the flashback sort of impression image that Lestat gets is Magnus captured a vampire. And he also mentioned that Magnus was some kind of alchemist and somehow turned himself into a vampire through either experimenting on this captured vampire or forcing the vampire to make him a vampire or something like that.
Yeah, I found this is a part that is, like I think it's important, but they just like it deserved in this book like 2 lines. I was like, no, wait a minute, I want to know more about that part.
Yeah, it reminded me of kind of like the zombie vampires from the last book. It's just like this, there's this really important element of vampire lore in this universe that we're just going to like mention once and move on. Like, okay. It also reminded me of like so many other things, of elements of Vampire the Masquerade. There's a clan in that game called the Tremere who used to be a house of mortal mages and alchemists. And they actually captured a vampire, did a bunch of experiments, and used this vampire to turn themselves into vampires through chemistry, essentially, and magic. So that kind of reminded me of that. And I'm curious if there was any inspiration. I mean, I know a lot of things about Vampire the Masquerade were inspired by these books, but I'm wondering if that one was in particular. Also, I noticed a couple of things. First, at one point, Lestat refers to other vampires as kindred. And that's a word that came to be the code word in the game to refer one vampire to another, that we are kindred. They don't call themselves vampires so much, but kindred. And also, and I don't know if this is specifically from this book, but there's a portion at which Lestat starts talking about the savage garden he has created. And I'm like, is that where the band got its name from? or is that a reference from something else? Like, was he referencing some other text or something? I just thought of Savage Garden. I was like, really? Savage Garden? But anyway, so yeah, Lestat is kidnapped by this vampire. He's shown by this vampire that he has no power over him. The Magnus takes him off to his secret tower somewhere and then into his basement, all the while telling him how much, he admires him and he's a wolf killer and all this other sort of like he's admired him from afar or something, and it's like I fell in love with you kind of stuff. And so he takes him to the secret basement. He shows him around his bachelor's pad. It's like, here's the basement I sleep in. Over here is the giant boulder that you have to move to get to the secret chamber where I keep my sarcophagus, and you can do that after I've made you into a vampire. And he makes him to a vampire, and suddenly Lestat's a vampire. And he says, okay, well, that's that. Now I need you to, I'm going to set myself on fire, then I need you to scatter the ashes. Like, what? And he jumps into a fire. Like, bye. And then he's just a pile of ash, and Lestat just throws the ashes out the window, and then suddenly he has his own secret headquarters with a giant stone sarcophagus and a huge chest full of riches and jewels and God knows what else that Magnus has collected over the centuries. So, and there you go. No preamble, no setup, no advice, except for don't drink from someone any further than before their heart stops.
And daylight. That's it.
And daylight will kill you. Everything else you're fine. And don't drink out of a dead body. Goodbye. Poof. And then Lestat's just like, cool. I mean,
I guess now I am a vampire.
I guess I'm a vampire now. That's just how it is. Okay, then. Yeah. And then he starts getting all sentimental and everything. He's got all this money. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And so he hires a lawyer because, of course, he's a vampire. Why wouldn't he? Or a solicitor, I suppose, might be the better way to put it. And he just starts spending like a drunken sailor on everything. Specifically
But
go ahead.
Before that, like the part where he finds like all the corpses that looks like him, that's super creepy.
Oh yeah, that part I'm still not quite sure I understand that. Like so in the basement of the basement, because there's a deeper basement in that basement, is a dungeon full of dead bodies stacked up, and almost all of them are effectively doppelgangers in appearance and hair color and everything to Lestat that have just been sitting there rotting forever. So Magnus was, I don't know, practicing before getting the real Lestat, or just obsessed with Lestat, needed to satisfy his hunger or something, just like some, super stalker. But I'm still not quite sure what the point of that was.
Yeah, and we never find out. I mean, because the only person that could maybe tell him why, that's the first guy he kills. So
yeah,
we don't know nothing.
Lestat wakes up on the first night, and there's a guy there saying, "Where is the master?" And like, oh, he's gone, he's dead. No, and so this old little man starts attacking him, and Lestat just drinks him dry and kills him, and then stacks his body down there with the rest of them. And it's like, okay, well, at least Magnus had the smarts to have daytime help, which apparently Lestat never thought to bring along with him into Interview with the Vampire, or Louis or Claudia did when they're riding across Carpathia in their carriage all by themselves. Anyway, I still complain about that, obviously. But yeah, so Lestat starts trying out his powers, and he finds that he can, just like Louis, kind of sees things beyond seeing things. He also can read the thoughts of people, get impressions from their minds, even at a distance. He can climb up walls like a spider and do all these flips, and he can use his voice in these ways that are just like inhuman. He can make it inhumanly loud, and he's just a superhero. He just has superpowers all over the place. Beyond being immortal and drinking blood and everything, he also has this vast array of superpowers.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he practices in a little village, trying to hunt people down and everything and listen to people's thoughts. And then after one night, he's like, well, I'm ready for Paris. And so he just takes his wealth and marches off to Paris and starts buying everything and anything, specifically trying to enrich and secretly try to help out all the people and institutions that he loved. So he sends a bunch of money to Nicholas, and he sends a bunch of money to the theater, and then he buys the theater, and then he's funding all these other little projects. He sends a bunch of money off to his mother and say how wonderful he's doing, and he just becomes like Mr. Man About Town overnight, and he's got this whole retinue of people now that are servicing him, but specifically his solicitor slash lawyer. What was his name? Like Roger or something? Rogette?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Definitely an overworked individual on Lestat's behalf. But yeah, he buys the theater and funds it and like gives them all this money so they can put on more shows and everything. He effectively gives Nicholas enough money that he never has to work again and can just focus on playing his violin. And he tries to be this shadow benefactor to everybody and everything after, because here's the thing. The last time anybody saw Lestat, he was in his room sleeping across the way from Nicholas. And then all of a sudden Magnus busts in the room and carries him out the window.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks Lestat is dead or something, but they're not sure. And so Lestat, he's struggling with, he has to stay in this life and he can't let them know that he's okay. And he can't, I have to keep it a secret, but no, I can't stay away from them. Oh, I miss my Nicholas. Oh, my mother. Oh, this, that, and the other thing. He's kind of turning into a little bit of a Louis in a way, although more of a self-possessed Louis, where Louis kind of took on like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Lestat's like his heart. Oh, mine hurts, I'm my heart. I have all this love for all these people and I'm separated. What am I going to do? And so eventually he breaks the first rule of being a vampire, which is contact the living still in your life and let them know that you're still around. First, he does this by stalking Nicholas and trying to spy on him and the other people involved in the theater. And he finds out that Nicholas is like all upset and frustrated and isn't really that happy. And then he reveals himself at the theater. He just walks in. I'm jumping ahead by a bunch of stuff, but there's a whole bunch of just elements of Lestat trying to be the guardian angel of the people and the places that he loves while he's making use of his new wealth. And there's not a lot of, if you whittle it down, not a lot happens in here, except a lot of the same thing where he's worrying over other people and trying to come to terms with the fact that he's not alive and separated from them, but he's still in Paris and trying to be part of their lives.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's the part.
anxiety?
It's the transition that he has to like to be at peace with the fact that he's not gonna like ever have contact with them, but he still has the need to like to take care of them in certain way.
One of the things that in all this introspection, in all this thinking about everything in this chapter, the one thing that I don't think is ever brought up by Lestat is, okay, I've been handed a secret lair, I've been handed immortality, I've been handed endless wealth, and yet the guy that did this to me dressed like a bag lady and then killed himself. And it's like, okay, maybe there's a lesson here of what I have to look forward to. Maybe this isn't like there didn't seem to be any sort of hesitation about what his own origin portended. He just kind of ran with it. And I'm just like, well, I suppose you have to learn for yourself, maybe. But yeah, eventually Lestat just can't resist touching base again, and he just kind of wanders back into the theater. And this is after weeks of them being funded by him and being the secret benefactor and everything. And he's kind of walks in and everybody's freaking out because they thought he was dead. He disappeared off the face of the earth, and they're all like rushing him and everything. And he's like overwhelmed because his new senses and just the emotion of it all. And then for the first time in I don't know how much time exactly passed between Lestat disappearing and him showing up at the theater. I think it was at least a few months, seemed like. And then Nicholas sees him and he's just overwhelmed. He just, oh my gosh, he just can't take it. And his heart, oh, my heart, my heart. And then he just wanders out on stage.
Yeah.
In front of everybody. And everybody thinks this is part of the show. And he just starts doing crazy vampire stuff on the stage because he's just so full of himself. He starts flipping and dancing and floating up to the ceiling and back down again. He starts singing in ways that humans can't. So the audience at first is very entertained, and then all of a sudden they're like, something's very wrong here. Everybody backstage is like, he's not hooked up to any wires. How is he doing that? Everybody starts freaking out, screaming and running away. And then some guy in the balcony, who at first I thought was supposed to be another vampire.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like he was the only one that was staying there, and he was staring at Lestat like he knew something. But he then pulls out a gun and shoots Lestat straight through the chest. And everybody's like standing there going like, what? And Nicholas goes up there to tackle the guy, and Lestat's just like, eh. And
I'm fine.
And it's like, and I'm reading this, and again, as a snob of the game that was inspired by this, I'm thinking, okay, well, as a vampire, you've just broken several vampire laws, and there are going to be hunters coming after you to burn you to death in about 24 hours. Because you effectively revealed your existence to mortals, and that's the biggest no-no. But Lestat apparently didn't care. He just felt, I guess he felt self-destructive, or he just craved attention again so much that he couldn't help but show off, I guess. More or less.
Yeah, and we still need to know what the I don't know, like the persons we think they're also vampires that are following him, like, you know, like through the night at the end of almost the chapter. But we still we have to figure out who those entities are.
Yeah, when Lestat was passing by or in a cemetery earlier in the chapter, he talked about sensing something that wasn't mortal or wasn't physically there. He just sensed a presence. He called it the presence. And I'm thinking, okay, are we talking ghosts? Because he says it wasn't actually like something tangible. It was just like a feeling or something, but it was running away. So I know that there are a whole menagerie of different creatures and species and things in the Anne Rice universe that eventually get revealed. Obviously, we've had these zombie vampires, and we've had the regular vampires, and now we have the presence. I know we eventually get to, you know, witches and warlocks and everything else, but so yeah, that's the only other supernatural thing that he's found so far, or at least come across, and he has yet to encounter another vampire. Or sense one that he knows of. And yeah, but it was just the section's called The Legacy of Magnus, and the legacy is a basement, a chest full of gold, and immortality. And oh, by the way, I love it so much, I'm going to kill myself on the first night I meet you. Goodbye.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's like, so I suppose that explains how Lestat has so little information to pass on to Louis, and yet we have a lot of book left.
Yeah.
And a lot of time. Now, if the interview with the vampire is accurate, Lestat brings his father to New Orleans, which means that the time between this and the interview with the vampire event starting, and I don't have the dates of when the whole timeline of this is supposed to be, must be relatively brief. Because his father wasn't exactly a spring chicken at the point in this story.
Yeah.
But we end the chapter. Lestat has an excellent idea. He wants his mother to go back to Italy, her homeland, I think it was, before she passes away. Because mom is very, very sick, and so he pays a bunch of money to have her just ensconced to Italy. And then he has the idea, oh, well, have Nicholas accompany her. That'll get him away from Paris and away from everything. Because after the debacle at the theater where he showed off his vampire powers, he just pays a ton of money to have the place shut down and move the entire company off to London, which I can't even imagine how much...
everybody out.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I had my, I don't even want to be reminded of them anymore. I want them gone. I want them gone. Like it's somebody who just broke up with somebody. You just want them out of your life forever, so you don't have to think about them again. And I can't even imagine how much money in that era would take to just make that happen.
Yeah.
Like pick up a whole theater crew from this city and then move them off to another city where they can buy a new theater. Like, that's how much money did he leave the guy? Unlimited funds, apparently. Anyway, he has the great idea that I'm going to send Nicholas to pick up my mother, and the two of them will go to Italy, and she'll be able to spend time in Italy before she passes away. And at the end of the chapter, the Lestat goes to visit his lawyer about something else, and the lawyer says, "No, your mother's here. She wants to see you now." And Lestat's like, "Tell her I'll see her tomorrow." He's like, "No, she's like dying." I'm like, no, I'll see her tomorrow. and that's how the chapter ends. Yeah, again, it brings up more questions in the vampire lore than it answers. Lestat is a completely different character from the one that we see in the first book, because he's all
Totally
magnanimous and benevolent and loving of everybody. But also with the events in this book, we might see maybe the beginnings of that cynicism starting to take over, because he can't have it all. He can't be immortal and rich and have all the people that he loves in his life. And maybe this is the beginnings of the downfall of that sort of well-meaning sort of artist, idealist, I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure we are going to like have some tragedies, let's say, because because it does not make sense, like the two different personalities that we now know of Lestat, So
Yeah.
I know that something terrible is gonna happen
Yeah, but
eventually.
even in this, though, he talks about at the beginning, he only goes out and tries to feed off of bad people, like people that try to rob him and everything.
Yeah.
And yet, in the very last section of the book, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken here, he attacks a woman and her baby.
Yes.
He eats a baby.
A baby.
A baby. We can say it again, a baby.
A baby.
And now, I was kind of taken aback by that, not just because of the imagery, but also because I understand he had his heart broke by understanding he can't really connect with the people in his life anymore, and this is all becoming very overwhelming. But to go from, I'm only going to attack those nasty people in the world that try to rob me or hurt other people and not drink innocent blood, to the most innocent of blood, that turn didn't seem earned by the events, if that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, the thing is that at that point, I think it's when he realizes that like his life has changed forever, and he doesn't have any like further information of what he has to do now. So it's like this terrible like point where he cannot go back to what he knows and loves, but he can't also know like what's his future, because this guy just decided like to turn him and then like burn himself. So
Yeah, but he still maintained that sort of heroic ideal even after that, and throughout all the way up to the theater. But then all of a sudden now he's murdering the most innocent of people. It just, that kind of heel turn needed something, either something far more dramatic and to the point of his own morality needed to have happened, or that's something that should have happened after a longer transition. Because now he's just a villain. Like I can't, in my mind, I can't see him I can't take him seriously as anything other than a monster. Whereas everything prior to this, he killed the wolves single-handedly. He loves his mother and wants to take care of her. He was a lover of the arts. He played at the theater and fell in love with performing. All these things that make someone, more human than human as far as like a hero. And now he's just an absolute murderer. I know I'm reading a vampire book, but this is his story. And the type of person that we're told that he is up to this point is an admirable one. Now, anything that he does or complains about from this point on is completely blunted because of this one act of slaughtering absolutely innocent people. And I don't know how that's going to affect how I read the rest of the book, except that I guess we'll wait and see. But regardless, it is what it is. He's done what he's done. At the same time, it just seemed like such a dramatic shift of morals that there was nothing that led up to it. So that was of all the things in this section, that's probably the one that made the least sense to me, unless there's something that comes up afterwards to somehow explain it, if they ever mention it again. And kind of gave me the most pause.
Oh, relax. It's just one baby.
Yes, I know. Just one.
Just one baby.
Just one baby. Anyway. Because, I mean, like I say, the up to this point, he's kind of like vampire superhero.
Yeah.
Climbing walls and reading minds and solving problems and taking down the bad guys. He's the moral vampire.
Yeah, well, we need to see what happens next, because apparently, like, the mother is about to die.
Mm-hmm.
And Nikolai is there too. So we'll see what happens when mother dies and Nikki's there, and I think he's gonna get worse.
I just have a feeling that if as we go through in the future chapters, if we start talking about Lestat being sad about something,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to say you killed a baby.
Yeah.
It'll be like, and then in this part, Lestat was sad about this, and this, and and he killed a baby. I'll just be saying that like in my mind or out loud on the show going forward, because it's like how do you redeem yourself after that one? I don't know that you can, but let's see over in the chat real quick. Urkele de Stefano, I ate a baby, get in my belly. Pretty much mother and child, he just came across and took out. So Darren Root, honestly, how much blood would you get from a baby? Well, I have no idea, but it wasn't about the quantity. If you read the book, it was about the quality.
Yeah.
Which is even worse, maybe. I don't know. You ridiculous lunatic. Not my kind of book. Just swinging by to say hello and drop a thumbs up. Thank you, Luna.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Not your kind of book. Like, okay, I could carry that joke forward, but I'm not going to, because I'm a nice guy. I'm a nice guy. I could have gotten nasty there for a second. I could have gotten really, really mean. Really
oh God.
But I'm not a mean person. I don't suddenly go after babies.
Yeah,
unlike
you don't need babies.
That's right. Urkele Stefano, Witches versus Vampires sounds cool. Made a good book for Terry Pratchett and Carpe Jugulum. Somewhere one of these books I bought the whole stack of used paperbacks in this series, and one of them, like the tagline on the front says, a delicious mixture of vampires and witches or something. I'm like, oh, well, I guess I know what to expect in that book at some point. I think that's Merrick. Whenever we get to that, which will be probably a few months from now or something. Let's see. So yeah, made into a vampire, abandoned, given a bunch of money, tries to save the world, but money can't buy you love. And that was the legacy of Magnus. So I guess the question is, has by the end of this one section, Lestat learned every lesson that Magnus did over however many hundreds of years he was alive? Like, wow, this existence kind of sucks. Maybe Magnus had the right idea.
Well, that's the thing. We really don't know why did he decided, like to just burn,
And why?
because we don't know
Yeah,
if there's, like a uh an expiration date on vampires, or if you need to, to do certain types of things, and then you're, like you have all your boxes checked, and then you need to burn yourself, or he was just tired of life and he just burned himself, or he, we don't know exactly why, because it's not that he, you know he tells us like, I am, tired of this, goodbye.
he doesn't leave a note. He doesn't leave some kind of
Yeah.
manuscript that says, oh, I have lived all these years and now I have realized. But no. And I mean, honestly, I'd be fine if we never get clarity on that. It's just there's a story here that we won't know, or maybe it's answered later on by somebody else's recollection. Like if, and again, I haven't read these books, so I don't know. So maybe like a future book, we have a character that knew Magnus when he was still alive that will eventually explain his thinking towards this end. But
Mm-hmm.
that was odd. But and also the alchemist capturing a vampire and then using him to turn himself into a vampire. I don't think there's a book in the series called Magnus, but maybe we'll get more on that later on. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what happens next. And I think most of my anticipation in the book overall is just how do we lead up to Interview with the Vampire more than anything else. But anyway, any other thoughts, Leonora, before we start wrapping up?
No, like, hopefully we get a little bit more information, like you said, about Magnus. And yeah, and I look forward to knowing what happens with Mother, and all the. I think it's gonna be like a tragedy there, so I want to know.
So for next week, Leonora and I will be reading part 3, which is titled Viaticum for the Marquise.
Mm-hmm.
And so on my copy, that starts on page 149. I've got like the old red cover paperback with the same kind of font you see on the thumbnails for these streams, if that helps for anything. But you should be able to find it pretty easy because it's just part 3. And it runs, I think, again, about 70 some odd pages, so it shouldn't be too much heavy lifting. Yeah, it's not actually it's a relatively short. Let's see, it's from 151 on mine to 205. So yeah, just 50 pages.
Okay.
How long is the section after that? Is it not too long? Okay, that one. I was checking it real quick because I'm wondering maybe it might make more sense.
Yeah, you want to finish it all now.
Well, let's see. So it's 100 for me. It's about 110 pages covering the next 2 chapters.
No,
too much. Okay, so we'll just aim on part 3 for next week. And I was just checking. I don't know if the second part was only like 20 pages or something. It might make sense. Anyway, everyone, there you go. That's the show. Look out for next Sunday at same time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, for the next installment of Book Review of the Vampire. We'll be taking a look at part 3 of The Vampire Lestat. A couple other notes real quick. The fundraiser for Satsu 2 Cents and his family was completed earlier today.
Yay!
$2,000 were raised. That makes up for the ambush billing that they end up having to take care of because of things completely outside of their control. And so now they're back to square one. Thank you guys so much, those of you that donated and shared it out. I know Satsu's very grateful for it. You can find him on Twitter, or sorry, X. If you want to talk to him on X, you can find him there at Fam2Cents. And let's see, anything else? I think that's everything. How about the Discord server real quick? Hey, if you'd like to discuss this book or other books, there's actually a books channel now on the Discord server. And let me pull up a link to that real quick for people to use in case you want to use it. And since we're on the stream here, there we go. If you click on that link, you'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you have to say the secret word in order to let me and my moderators know that you watched the stream to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is Magnus. Just say hello and Magnus, and we will know. That's M-A-N-G-U-S. Sorry, M-A-G-N-U-S. I can spell.
Mangus.
Mangus. If you also say Mangus, I'll really know you watched the stream. But with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. If you have comments on this book or anything else that we read, please leave them in the comments below afterwards. Oh, and also for those of you that donated either to myself or to the fundraisers at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Leonora, thank you for joining me as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And don't eat babies.
No.
Bye.